right, so we're back, and today we're going to dive into something that, really hit a lot of gamers where it hurts.
Oh, yeah.
The PlayStation Network outage
That was a rough one.
this past weekend, yeah. So we got a bunch of articles, reports, the whole 9 yards to try and unpack this thing.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, right? Because you have this massive outage happening right when we're seeing this larger shift in the industry towards, digital downloads and streaming and everything.
Yeah, and this wasn't just, like a little blip like, oh, the servers are down for a couple minutes, we'll be right back up. This was, the whole thing.
The whole shebang.
For a full day.
Yeah.
And it looks like, according to Rectify Gaming, it started Friday evening, 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
And didn't come back online until Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m.
So a full 24 hours.
Yeah, no online play.
Wow.
Couldn't access the PlayStation Store.
Right?
Even problems with PS Video.
It was a complete blackout. I mean, basically, if you were a PlayStation user and you relied on any of the online functionalities, you were just cut off.
You were done.
Completely.
And, it's interesting because you think about it, right? Like, for a lot of gamers, that's their main source of entertainment.
Their console is their hub.
Yeah, that's where they're buying their games. That's where they're, watching movies. If there's, connecting with friends online, everything.
It's your whole ecosystem.
And then suddenly it's just gone.
Poof.
Like, what do you do?
Right. You're in the middle of a game or you're, wanting to download that new release that you've been looking forward to all week and boom, you're shut out.
Especially because, this was only PlayStation.
Right, right.
So it's not like, the entire internet was down.
Exactly.
Like Xbox Live was fine.
Right.
Nintendo's online service, fine.
Still going strong.
Steam, fine.
Yeah, so it really does raise those questions, right? About if you're just relying on one platform, what are the potential vulnerabilities there?
What happens if that one platform goes down?
Exactly.
And of course, this also kind of feeds into that whole debate that's been going on forever about, physical versus digital media.
The eternal struggle.
Yeah.
It's interesting, too, because, when you look at how Sony handled this initially, it wasn't exactly reassuring.
No.
I mean, for hours, all we got from their official support account on X was just, we're aware of issues.
Yeah, just issues. Like no details, no explanations, nothing.
Vague communication.
So, and that always kind of leads to more frustration.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because when there's a vacuum of information, that's when the rumors start swirling.
Yeah, you go on social media and it's like, oh, was it hackers? Was it a massive server failure? Did someone trip over a cord at Sony headquarters? The speculation goes wild.
People were grasping at straws trying to figure out what was going on.
And it wasn't until much later that Sony finally came out and said, okay, PSN services are back online.
And even then, it was a pretty, let's say, underwhelming apology.
5 extra days of PlayStation Plus.
A drop in the bucket for many. Think about the disruption this caused for millions of users. 5 days doesn't quite cut it.
So we know it happened, right? And we know how Sony kind of reacted, but what actually caused this massive outage?
Right, right.
Was it something intentional, like a cyber attack, or was it just a colossal technical blunder? The articles we have don't really give us a definitive answer.
It's still a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
But there are some intriguing possibilities.
Oh, yeah, definitely some things to consider.
One theory that's been floating around is a distributed denial of service attack, or a DDoS attack.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Basically, imagine someone's trying to fill a drinking glass with a fire hose.
Okay, I can picture that.
That's essentially what a DDoS attack does. Hackers flood a server with so much traffic that it just can't handle it. It gets overwhelmed and crashes.
So they just bombard the system with requests until it collapses under pressure.
Exactly. And it's a common tactic used to disrupt online services, so it's definitely a possibility in this case.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then again, these systems are so complex, right?
Incredibly complex.
So couldn't it also just be a simple technical malfunction?
Oh, absolutely. A single server could fail, there could be a software glitch, and suddenly it's like a domino effect, bringing down the whole network.
And then, of course, there's always the human element to consider, right?
Yes. The wild card.
Like a misconfiguration, a botched update, maybe someone, fat-fingered a line of code. Those things happen.
More often than you'd think. And they can have disastrous consequences.
Yeah. So it seems like we're still kind of in the dark about what exactly happened, but I think all of these possibilities really highlight how vulnerable things are in this, increasingly digital world.
Absolutely. I mean, this outage, regardless of its cause, really throws a spotlight on our dependence on these digital systems and the fragility that comes with that. It brings us back to the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
This whole shift towards digital media and the questions that come with it. Like, what about ownership? What about access? And who ultimately controls our digital lives?
And I think, the PSN outage, no matter what caused it, it's a pretty stark reminder that relying solely on digital access, well, it's not without its risks.
It's like building a house on a foundation that could potentially crumble at any moment. And in this case, that foundation is made up of servers, software, and networks, all of which are vulnerable to attacks, errors, and those good old-fashioned human blunders.
Yeah. And, it wasn't just gamers who felt the pain of this outage. I
Yeah.
think it really exposed this kind of potential blind spot in the whole industry's direction.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing this huge push towards, everything being digital, but are we missing something here? Like, what about physical media? Does that still have a place? I mean, yeah, you're right. When you look at the numbers, it's pretty crazy. I think Rectify Gaming mentioned that physical game sales now make up something like only 16% of all the purchases.
16%,
Yeah.
that's a huge drop. And honestly, that trend's probably just going to continue.
Yeah.
I mean, both Sony and Microsoft, they've both already released consoles that don't even have disk drives.
Yeah.
And then you have Sony's recent decision to completely stop making Blu-ray discs. Like that tells you something about where their heads are at.
Yeah, it really does. It's like they're going all in on this, digital future.
Yeah.
But what if that future has these hiccups like this PSN outage?
Right. That's the big question. With digital, you don't really own the game. It's more like you're renting it. You're licensing access to it, and
Yeah.
that access can be taken away or disrupted, just like what we saw.
So are you saying that even though I paid for a digital game, it's not really mine in the same way that a physical copy would be?
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality.
Mhm.
If a company decides, hey, we're shutting down the servers or we're taking this game off our store, that's it. You can't access it anymore, even if you paid for it.
So it's kind of like having this digital library that can just disappear.
It's a good way to put it. And it's not, some far-flung idea either. There have been cases where companies have pulled games from their stores and players who bought them, they're just out of luck.
That's a little scary, honestly.
Mm.
So then what's the argument for keeping physical media around, with everything becoming so digital?
Well, one of the big things is ownership, right? You have something real, something you can hold, collect, even resell if you want to.
Right. It's kind of like, I don't know, like owning a vinyl record versus just having a song in your playlist.
Exactly. And then there's the preservation aspect.
Mm.
Physical media, it doesn't really degrade or get lost in the same way digital files can.
Right.
So it's a way to make sure you can still play those games way down the line, even if, a company goes under or shuts down their servers.
Okay, so it's like an insurance policy almost against all the unknowns of the digital world.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. And it's not just about individual gamers either. Physical media helps preserve our cultural history. Imagine if all the classic games were only digital and a company decides to delete them. That's a whole chunk of gaming history gone.
Yeah, that's a good point. But then again, physical stuff can get damaged or lost too. I mean, discs get scratched, cartridges break, boxes get lost.
True. But there are ways to protect against that.
Mhm.
You can be careful with how you store your games, make backups, even get damaged discs repaired. And worst case scenario, you can usually find replacements, like online or in used game stores.
So it's like weighing the good and the bad of both. Like digital's easy to get and convenient, but physical gives you actual ownership and it lasts longer.
Yeah, and in the end, it comes down to having choices. Gamers should be able to choose what works best for them. What do they value more?
And there's still some companies out there that, are putting out physical games. The article talked about Square Enix releasing that new Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, on 2 discs.
2 discs. Wow.
Yeah.
In this day and age, it's a pretty bold move.
It is, and I think it shows there's definitely still a market for physical games,
Yeah.
especially for people who care about owning those games and making sure they'll always have them.
And Capcom, they've said they're not going to get rid of physical games completely. They know that a good chunk of their players prefer having those physical copies.
It's good to see some companies pushing back a bit,
Yeah.
saying, hey, people should have choices, and physical media is still important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are companies like Limited Run Games. They actually focus on making physical editions for Xbox and other platforms. They're kind of catering to a niche market, but it shows that, there's still a demand for those physical copies. They're offering an alternative. Not everyone wants to go all digital. They're saying, hey, you don't have to give up control over your games. You can still own them.
It's like a mini revolt against the digital takeover.
Maybe, but it's more than that. It's about making sure that gamers have a voice and that their choices matter. The gaming world's changing, and it's up to both gamers and companies to decide what that future looks like.
Yeah, it seems like this whole PSN thing has really got people talking about, do we want all digital or do we want that kind of guarantee of a physical copy?
It's definitely brought it back into the conversation. And what's interesting is this isn't just about games. I mean, we're seeing the same kind of debate around music, movies, books, pretty much every kind of media.
You're right. It's like everything's going digital.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what do we actually value in our entertainment? Is it just having everything instantly available, like a massive library at our fingertips? Or is it more about actually owning something, being able to access it, whether we have internet or not having to worry about a company just taking it away?
Yeah, like, do you want a streaming service with millions of songs, or do you want a record collection you put together yourself?
Perfect example. And just like with music, there are people who are really passionate about both sides.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Some gamers love the ease of just downloading a game, and, it's usually cheaper too. But then you have others who, cherish their physical copies. They're like prized possessions.
Right. And then there's this growing group who are kind of doing both. They see the value in both digital and physical.
So maybe it's not about choosing one or the other, but finding a way to have both.
I think that's a really good point. Maybe this outage will push companies to, rethink their approach a little bit, offer more protection for digital content, and realize that physical media still matters to a lot of people.
Yeah, it'd be great to see companies be more upfront about, what your rights are when you buy a digital game, and also give more options for people who want a physical copy.
Absolutely. And it's not just on the companies, it's on us too. As gamers, we need to make informed decisions, understand what we're getting into with digital versus physical, and support the formats we believe in.
So what can we, as gamers, actually do
Yeah.
in this, constantly changing world?
I think the biggest thing is just being aware. Pay attention to the terms of serving on those digital platforms, know the risks and benefits of both formats, and then choose what feels right for you.
And maybe take a look at those old consoles you have, or, check out the games at a local store.
Exactly. See what's out there. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And remember, the future of gaming is still up in the air. We all have a say in it.
This whole deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It really feels like the gaming industry is at a crossroads, and the decisions we make now are going to have a big impact on how we experience games in the future.
Couldn't agree more. This PSN outage, as frustrating as it was, I think it was a wake-up call. The digital world has its downsides too. It's not perfect. It's a reminder that we need to work together, both gamers and companies, to create a gaming world that's exciting and new, but also reliable and fair.
Really well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. As we move more and more into the digital world, let's not forget what we learned from this. Let's try to build a future where our games are easy to access, but also safe and lasting.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.